The vampire king's heir bit the waitress's sleeve. Everyone panicked, until she smiled back. The city of Arindor was alive in the pale glow of the full moon. Its spires and towers stretched toward the sky like frozen fingers, casting long shadows across cobblestone streets. Lanterns flickered, and whispers of magic lingered in the night air. Humans moved quickly along the streets, wary of the vampire nobility who ruled the city with quiet authority. Among them, Leora carried herself with practiced calm, her hands steady despite the weight of trays and the murmurs of patrons. She worked at the Silver Lily, a small tavern tucked into a narrow alley that smelled of roasted bread and simmering stew. It was a simple place, but for Leora, it was a world of routine and quiet control, where she could move freely without attracting the attention of the powerful. She knew the rules. Keep your head down, serve quickly, and never ever look too closely at the shadows that lingered at the edges of the city. But that night, the shadows seemed to move closer. The air carried a strange tension, a hum that made the hairs on her neck rise. Rumors had been spreading for weeks. A ball at the palace, the heir to the vampire throne appearing for the first time in years. Calin, the vampire prince known for his cold cruelty and icy demeanor, would be among the guests. Stories whispered of his sharp temper and sharper fangs, of the way he could strike fear with a glance. Leora had no desire to see him. Nobility and power meant danger, and she had survived too long to tempt fate. She set down a tray of wine for a group of nobles, offering polite smiles and low curtsies, careful not to attract attention. The laughter around her seemed distant, muted by her concentration, until a chill ran across her sleeve. It happened in an instant. A shadow fell over her, taller and darker than anyone else in the room. Before she could turn, sharp teeth grazed her sleeve. The bite was sudden, almost imperceptible, yet it sent a shiver down her spine. Gasps erupted around her. Patrons stepped back, their eyes wide with terror. Murmurs filled the room. Leora froze, her pulse quickening, but she did not scream. Bias turned slowly and found herself staring into the icy eyes of Calin himself. He looked down at her with a mixture of surprise and something else she could not name. Curiosity, perhaps, or intrigue. The tavern went silent, as if the air itself held its breath. Caelin's fangs were sharp, glinting in the moonlight, and the bite mark on her sleeve seemed to hum with a strange energy. Every eye in the room was on them, waiting for some display of violence, for a human to collapse in fear. But Leora did something no one expected. She smiled, a small, calm smile that reached her eyes, softening them but not weakening her. It was a smile that spoke of courage, of defiance, of knowing she belonged to herself and no one else. He blinked once, then twice, as if unaccustomed to such fearless honesty. A shadow passed across his features, and he stepped back slightly, breaking the tension in the room, but not the pull between them. The nobles whispered furiously, but Leora's heart raced not from fear, but from a strange, unnameable recognition. "You are bold," Calin said, his voice low and smooth, like silk brushing over steel. It was not a question nor a command, but a statement that seemed to hang in the air like a challenge. Leora straightened, meeting his gaze without flinching. "I have learned to survive," she said softly. "And sometimes surviving means smiling at shadows." The corners of Caelin's mouth lifted ever so slightly. It was almost a smirk, almost a laugh, though neither fully came. Yet it was enough to stir something deep within him. A flicker of warmth in a world of cold calculation. Before anyone could react further, Calin turned, moving through the tavern like a shadow slipping across the walls. His presence seemed to suck the light from the air, leaving a chill that made the candles tremble. Leora watched him go, her pulse still racing, her mind buzzing with a mixture of fear, curiosity, and something more dangerous: fascination. The room slowly returned to its normal rhythm, though whispers lingered like ghosts. Patrons whispered about what had just happened, speculating wildly, their imaginations filling the gaps with tales of human folly and vampire hunger. But Leora ignored them, her thoughts still with the figure who had just bitten her sleeve. She could feel it, the mark faint against the fabric, pulsing with a strange energy. It was a reminder that something had changed, though she did not yet understand what. Later, when she returned to the quiet of the kitchen, she pressed a hand against her sleeve and thought of Kaelin's eyes. Icy, sharp, and unreadable. She did not know why, but she felt certain that the moment would not be forgotten. Something had passed between them, something silent and unspoken, and it lingered like smoke in the air. Meanwhile, Kaelin stood in the shadowed corridors of the palace, his thoughts a storm of confusion. He had expected fear, submission, perhaps even outrage, but not that calm, unwavering smile. Her bravery was a challenge, a puzzle, and it stirred something in him he had not felt in years. Intrigue, and perhaps the faintest spark of admiration. He was the heir to a throne steeped in darkness, bound by tradition and cruelty, and yet, for the first time, he wondered if he could step outside the shadow cast by his ancestors. But such thoughts were dangerous. Nobles watched him for weakness, rivals waited for missteps, and a human's boldness could be deadly. Back at the Silver Lily, Leora went about her tasks with a quiet determination. She was aware that her life had changed, though she did not yet know how. The bite, the gaze, the silent acknowledgement between them. It was as if a thread had been tied between her and the vampire heir, fragile yet unbreakable. She did not realize that her quiet strength, the smile that had defied fear, had left Kaelin unsettled. He would remember it, carry it through the night, and in the days to come it would draw him back into her orbit, whether she wanted it or not. The city outside continued its restless rhythm, but for Leora the world felt narrower, focused on the mark and the eyes that had pierced her calm. She did not yet know that destiny had its eyes on her, or that the simple act of smiling at a shadow could change the course of empires. The night wore on, and the moon climbed higher, spilling silver light across the city. Leora finally finished her shift, the tavern now quiet, and stepped into the alley. The cool air brushed against her skin, carrying the faint scent of jasmine and night-blooming flowers. She paused, feeling a strange pull toward the palace, though she had never been inside its gates. A shiver ran down her spine, but it was not from cold. It was anticipation, a delicate thread of tension that made her heart beat faster. She did not know what awaited her, nor did she know that Kaelin, the vampire heir who had bitten her sleeve, was already walking the corridors of his palace, thinking of nothing but the human girl who dared to smile at him. And so, under the full moon of Arendor, two paths had crossed. One, shaped by centuries of darkness and power. The other fragile and human, yet unyielding in its courage. Both had been changed in that instant, both bound by a silent acknowledgement that would echo through the coming days. The city slept, unaware of the threads weaving around it. But Leora felt it in her chest, a quiet hum of destiny. The bite on her sleeve was more than a mark. It was a promise of challenges to come, of danger and longing, of power and transformation. She did not yet understand it, but deep inside she knew that nothing would ever be the same. And somewhere in the shadowed halls of the palace, Kaelin's lips pressed into a frown of thought, and for the first time in many years he wondered if the rules he had lived by could bend for a human, if the world could shift for a smile. The moon climbed higher, silver and watchful, and the city of Arendor held its breath, as if the night itself waited for the next step of the story that had begun with a single bite, and a single, fearless smile. The city of Arendor slept uneasily beneath the watchful silver moon. From the towers of the palace, Kaelin, heir to the vampire throne, observed the streets below. Shadows shifted in the alleys, and the air hummed with whispers of the night, some innocent, some dangerous, but his mind was not on the city. It was on the human girl whose sleeve he had bitten the night before. Leora moved through her morning as usual, but the memory of Kaelin's eyes haunted her. Every glance at the city felt different. Every shadow in the street made her pulse quicken. Though she had not seen him since the tavern, she could feel his presence in the very air around her. It was as if a thread, invisible and unbreakable, stretched between them, pulling at her heart and stirring her curiosity. At the Silver Lily, whispers of the previous night had reached her ears. Patrons spoke in hushed tones, speculation and rumor painting her as brave or foolish. She ignored them, focusing on the rhythm of her work. Every cup she polished, every tray she carried, reminded her of a simple truth. Life must go on, even when the world shifts beneath your feet. Yet, beneath the routine, tension coiled. Leora could sense it, the subtle shift of fate, the brush of power she did not understand. The bite on her sleeve pulsed faintly, almost as if it held a heartbeat of its own. Meanwhile, Kalen walked the palace halls with measured steps. His advisor spoke constantly, their words filled with politics and strategy, but he heard only echoes of the night before. The girl, her boldness, her smile. It should have angered him. Humans were weak, fleeting, and dangerous, but it did not. Instead, it lingered in his thoughts like a melody he could not forget. The palace was a labyrinth of shadow and light. Moonlight poured through tall windows, casting silvery patterns on marble floors. Kalen paused at one window, looking out over the city. His reflection in the glass showed eyes colder than ice, yet within them, a flicker of something he had long thought lost. Curiosity, and perhaps the faintest stirrings of admiration. Kalen's solitude was broken by the soft footsteps of his brother Dorian, who leaned casually against the doorframe. "Still thinking of her?" he asked, a sly grin on his lips. Kalen's jaw tightened. "You would not understand," he said, his voice low. "Death. She is different, fragile. One bite and she could have been ruined, or dead." "How is that different?" Kalen's eyes darkened. She smiled. She did not scream. She did not flee. She faced me. And he trailed off, unwilling to admit the truth. Dorian shook his head with a knowing smirk. "I are the heir, Kalen. You are supposed to be unshakable, yet a human girl has unsettled you. Perhaps there is more weakness in you than I thought." Kalen did not answer, only turned from the window, his thoughts still with Leora. The following days brought no relief. The palace was alive with intrigue. Nobles whispered of Kalen's unusual distraction, their suspicions sharp. For the first time in his life, Kalen felt the weight of his position pressing down, not with authority, but with danger. A wrong move could destroy him, and yet he could not remove Leora from his mind. Leora, for her part, tried to return to normal life, but the pull of the palace lingered. She moved through the city with quiet awareness, noticing the way shadows seemed to watch her, and the way the moonlight seemed brighter, almost guiding her steps. Dusk, she had not seen Kalen again, but she felt his attention on her, even from afar. One evening, as she closed the tavern and stepped into the alley, a shadow moved across the wall. Heart racing, she prepared for danger, but it was only a figure in the moonlight. Kalen stepped from the shadows, silent, his expression unreadable. "You should not be here," he said, his voice soft yet commanding.
"I live here," Leora replied, steadying herself.
"I work here. This alley is mine as much as the palace belongs to you." He studied her, his eyes sharp. "You are brave, but bravery alone does not protect you." "And yet," she said, her gaze unwavering, "it has kept me safe so far. Perhaps even tonight." Kalen's lips curved into the faintest hint of a smile. "Perhaps," he murmured. Or perhaps it draws you into dangers you do not yet understand. There was a moment of silence, heavy with unspoken thoughts. Neither moved. Neither spoke further. And yet, between them, something stirred. A connection neither fully understood, but both could not deny. Days later, Leora found herself at the market, gathering supplies for the tavern. She sensed a presence before she saw it, a chill in the air, the subtle shift of shadows. When she turned, Kaelin stood among the stalls, blending with the crowd, watching her. "Kaelin," she asked, her voice calm but curious, did not move closer immediately. "Do not follow me," he said softly, though there was no threat in his tone. "I am not safe." "Neither am I," she replied quietly, meeting his gaze. "But I am not afraid." Humans were fragile. They were fleeting. They were supposed to be afraid. Yet here she was, steady and unflinching, a spark of life in the midst of darkness. Before Kaelin could respond, a group of vampires approached, their expressions cold and calculating. One of them, Lord Malric, had always been wary of Kaelin's distractions.
"What's this?" he demanded, eyes narrowing on Leora. "The heir consorting with a human?"
Is this wisdom or madness? Kaelin's hand moved subtly, and the shadows seemed to twist around him, protective and sharp. "Step back," he said, his voice carrying authority that chilled the air. "She is under my protection." Malric's lips curled into a sneer. "Do not let your heart cloud your judgment, Kaelin. A human's presence could ruin everything." Leora stepped forward, her gaze steady. "First, I am no one's pawn," she said. "I will not be used to ruin anyone, nor will I run in fear." The words hung in the air, a quiet defiance that silenced even the murmurs of the market. Kaelin's chest tightened, a strange mix of pride and worry threading through him. She was fearless, yet he sensed the fragility beneath her courage, and he could not ignore it. The group of vampires retreated reluctantly, but their eyes were sharp and filled with suspicion. Kaelin remained close to Leora, watching her as she moved through the crowd, aware that she was stepping into a world far beyond what she understood. That night, Kaelin returned to the palace, unable to sleep. He moved through the empty halls, thinking of Leora, replaying the moments of their encounters. She was human, and yet she had touched something inside him that he had long thought dead. A spark of warmth, a flicker of hope, a challenge he did not know he needed. He thought of the bite on her sleeve. It had been accidental, yet it left a mark that lingered beyond the flesh, an unspoken bond, a pull of destiny. And he wondered, for the first time, what it might mean if he chose to cross the boundaries that had defined him for centuries. Meanwhile, Leora sat in her small room above the tavern, her thoughts restless. She did not understand the pull she felt toward the palace, toward the cold prince who had bitten her sleeve. She only knew that life had become more than routine, more than survival. It was now a thread of tension and curiosity, a silent call that she could neither ignore nor resist. The days passed, each encounter building the unspoken connection between them. Kaelin would watch from the shadows, leaving subtle signs of protection, a quiet presence at the market, a shadow that warded off danger, a whisper of guidance when she did not expect it. And Leora, though cautious, began to notice these moments, recognizing the invisible thread that drew them closer. Yet the danger was never far. Rivals within the vampire court grew restless, noticing Kaelin's distraction and plotting to exploit it. Leora had only glimpsed the edge of the court's schemes, unaware of the full storm that awaited her. Every smile, every glance, every heartbeat between them carried risk. One evening as Leora walked through the quiet streets, she sensed danger before it arrived. A figure lunged from the shadows, aiming to strike. Reflexively, she stepped back, and the blade glanced past her. A sharp, commanding voice split the air. "Enough." Kalen stepped from the shadows, his presence overwhelming. Shadows bent and shifted around him, a protective barrier that pushed the attacker back. Leora froze, her eyes wide. He had arrived without sound, without warning, yet in perfect control. The attacker fled, leaving only a lingering whisper of threat. Kylan turned to Leora, his icy eyes softer than she had ever seen. "Do you understand now?" he asked quietly. "The world you walk in is dangerous." "I understand," she said, steady, though her pulse raced. "But I am not afraid of shadows I can face." Kalen studied her, and for a moment the weight of his crown and his family's legacy seemed to falter. Here was someone who met him not with fear, but with quiet defiance. Bare. And in that defiance he found a mirror of something he had lost, the part of himself that had believed in hope, in connection, in change. The night stretched on, filled with unspoken thoughts. Neither moved closer, yet the space between them was electric with tension and curiosity. A bond had formed, fragile yet undeniable, shaped by danger, courage, and an unspoken promise. The full moon rose higher, silver and unyielding, casting its light across the city. Leora returned to her room, unaware that Kalen's eyes watched her from the palace tower, the bond between them strengthening with each passing heartbeat. Duty, power, and expectation weighed upon him, yet the pull toward her was impossible to resist. And so, under the moonlit sky of Arindor, their paths were bound ever tighter. Shadows whispered. The city held its breath, and two lives, one mortal, one immortal, trembled on the edge of destiny. For Leora, life was no longer routine. For Kalen, the icy control he had known for centuries was shifting. And for both, the danger, the longing, and the unspoken connection promised that their story was only beginning. The night ended not with answers, but with anticipation. Neither knew what the next day would bring, only that the invisible thread between them pulled stronger with each step. And somewhere deep in the palace, Kalen whispered her name to the shadows, a promise of protection, of curiosity, and of a connection neither could yet define. The forest outside Arindor's walls was a place of whispered legends. Blackened trees arched overhead, their branches like skeletal fingers against the silver moon. Mist curled around the roots, and the wind carried the scent of damp earth and something older, something ancient. This was a place humans rarely entered, and vampires only with caution. Yet Kalen and Leora found themselves walking side by side along a narrow path, drawn by forces neither fully understood. Kalen's cloak swirled around his ankles as he moved with silent grace, every step measured, every gesture controlled. Leora, though human, walked steadily, her heart beat steady even as the forest seemed alive with unseen eyes. Her fingers brushed against the mark on her sleeve, the faint imprint left by Kalen's bite. It pulsed softly, a quiet reminder of the night when everything changed.
"Why here?" Leora asked, her voice calm but curious. "Why bring me to a place like this?"
He paused, letting the mist curl around them. "There are truths you must see for yourself," he said finally. "Truths about this city, my family, and about you." Leora frowned slightly.
About me? Yes, Kalen said, his gaze sharp and unwavering.
"You are not an ordinary human, Leora. There is something in your bloodline that even I did not realize. Desk, something powerful, something dangerous."
Her breath caught. Dangerous? She echoed.
"I'm just a girl who works at a tavern." Kalen's eyes softened, though only slightly. "You are far more than you know. There's a connection between you and the curse that binds my family, one I thought would never be broken." They continued walking, the mist thickening. The forest seemed to hum with magic, old and deep. Every shadow they passed seemed alive, twisting just beyond the edge of vision. Leora's pulse quickened, not from fear, but from anticipation. She had felt the strange pull toward Kaelin from the moment he had bitten her sleeve, but now she began to sense the true reason. Destiny itself was threading their lives together. At the center of the forest, a clearing opened. Moonlight poured down, illuminating a circle of ancient stones etched with runes. The air vibrated with power, and Leora instinctively slowed, feeling the weight of history in the ground beneath her feet. "This is where it begins," Kaelin said, his voice quieter now, almost reverent. "The place where my family's curse was sealed generations ago. The place where it can be undone. But only with someone like you." Leora looked at the stones, her mind racing. "Me? Why me?" Kaelin turned, his eyes locking with hers. "Because the curse feeds on darkness and cruelty. Only a heart that knows courage, hope, and compassion can break it. Only someone who can face me without fear, like you, can change what has been set for centuries." "And what if I fail?" Kaelin's expression darkened. "Then the curse continues. My family suffers, and the city suffers. But I believe you will not fail." And his voice softened. "I believe in you, Leora." The weight of his words settled on her. It was not just trust, it was faith. A rare and dangerous gift from someone like Kaelin, someone who had seen centuries of treachery and cruelty. For the first time, Leora felt the depth of her own potential, the power she had always ignored in herself. They trained in secret, returning night after night to the forest. Kaelin taught her to sense the magic around them, to feel the pull of shadows and the rhythm of the moon. Leora learned quickly, discovering a strength she had never known. Her pulse guided the energies of the forest, her courage shaping the invisible currents that twisted between the trees. And Kaelin struggled alongside her. He had always relied on his vampire power, on dominance and control, on fear to command obedience. But with Leora, he had to restrain himself. Every lesson was a test of patience, every interaction a struggle between desire and discipline. He could not harm her, could not push too far, could not let his darkness overwhelm her light. And yet, with every shared moment, he felt the walls he had built around his heart beginning to crumble. Their bond grew stronger, tempered by trust and tested by danger. One night, as the moon bathed the clearing in silver light, Leora reached out instinctively, her hand brushing against Kaelin's. Electricity shot through both of them, a silent acknowledgement of the connection that had deepened beyond words. Kaelin's fangs ached to bite, but he held himself back, his hand hovering near hers, trembling with unspoken longing. "Do not mistake this," he said quietly. "I will not let my instincts control me." Leora's lips curved into a faint smile. "I do not fear your instincts," she said softly. "I fear what would happen if you did not control them." The words hung in the air, a delicate, dangerous balance. Between them, desire and restraint, trust and fear, curiosity and longing danced in silence. But the peace of their training could not last. Within the palace, whispers had grown louder. Kaelin's distraction had not gone unnoticed. Rivals within the vampire court plotted, searching for leverage. One of Kaelin's closest advisors, Lord Malric, had been watching Leora from the shadows, and he now saw an opportunity to strike. One evening, as Leora walked home through the city, she was seized by a group of masked figures. They moved quickly, their intentions clear. She struggled, but they were too strong. Prickled at the edges of her mind, but she drew upon the courage she had cultivated in the forest.
"Leora!" Kaelin's voice split the night.
Shadows twisted and roared to life around him, sweeping the attackers aside with controlled fury. In a heartbeat, the threat was gone, leaving only silence and the faint hum of magic. Kaelin reached her side, his eyes searching hers. "Are you unharmed?" he asked, though the sharp edge of his voice betrayed his anger. "Yes," she said, steady though her heart still raced. I am unharmed. He studied her, his expression torn.
It was reckless. You must never walk alone again. I will not hide, Leora replied softly. Not from the world, not from you.
He wanted to protect her, to shield her from the darkness, yet he could not cage her spirit. The realization was both terrifying and exhilarating. The next day, Kaelin brought Leora to a hidden chamber in the palace, a place few had ever seen. Shelves lined with ancient tomes, scrolls filled with runes, and artifacts pulsed with faint energy. This, Kaelin said, is where I have studied the curse for centuries, and now, with you, we may have a chance to undo it. The pages were filled with symbols she could not yet read, yet the words seemed to hum when she touched them. Her pulse quickened, and the mark on her sleeve flared faintly, as if responding to the ancient magic.
The curse is tied to my bloodline, Kaelin explained. It is old, powerful, and unforgiving.
To break it, we must combine your courage with my restraint, your light with my shadow. Only then can we hope to undo what centuries of darkness have wrought. She nodded slowly, understanding more in that moment than she had in all her life. The danger, the risk, the fear, all were part of the path. But she would not turn back. Not now. Not ever. Weeks passed. Kaelin and Leora worked tirelessly, their connection deepening with every challenge. Shadows twisted in response to their will. Whispers of the past guided their steps, and slowly, the power of the curse began to unravel. Yet even as they neared their goal, betrayal struck. One of Kaelin's closest allies, a trusted vampire named Selvar, revealed their secret to the council. The revelation was a shockwave through the palace. Whispers of treason filled the halls. Leora was taken by rival vampires, imprisoned in a high tower guarded by the most loyal of the court's dark enforcers. Kaelin's anger was immediate, sharp, and dangerous. But beneath it, there was something else. Fear. Fear for her safety. Fear of losing the only person who had ever faced him without fear. Fear that the threads of destiny could unravel before their work was done. He stormed to the council chamber, his presence filling the room with tension. "Release her!" he demanded, his voice carrying the weight of centuries of authority and power. "She is no threat. She is part of the solution." "The Heir has gone mad," one whispered. "A human cannot influence our legacy." Kaelin's gaze swept over them, cold and unwavering. "Try me," he said softly, though every word carried the promise of action. "Or stand aside and watch what loyalty, courage, and power combined can accomplish." The council froze, unsure whether to fear or obey. Kaelin's reputation, his presence, his command, all were undeniable. Bet. Yet the stakes were higher than ever. Leora's fate rested in the balance, and with it, the chance to break the curse. That night, Kaelin stood before the tower where Leora was imprisoned. The moon hung low, silver and silent, as shadows writhed at his command. He looked up at her window, heart hammering, and whispered her name. "I will not let them harm you," he promised. "I will not fail you, Leora." Inside her chamber, Leora pressed her hand to the window, feeling the pull of his words, the strength of his resolve. "I trust you," she whispered, though she knew the danger was far from over. And so, under the watchful moon of Arindor, destiny tightened its grip. Leora's courage, Kaelin's restraint, and the threads of magic woven between them had begun to unravel centuries of darkness. But the final trials were yet to come. Astandalism's arduries. This time. I am the brave from this time. He can only see through one eye, his other swollen shut and the color of tar. He glances around and destines. With this Standalism's disaster was thinner. The night ended, not with victory but with anticipation. The curse was not yet broken, the danger not yet past, but the story, their story, was only growing stronger. The first light of dawn had not yet touched Arendor when Kaelin stood at the edge of the city, shadows curling around him like living tendrils. His cloak billowed in the night wind, but his focus was entirely on the tower where Leora was held. Every heartbeat carried urgency. Every thought weighed with the knowledge that the final confrontation had arrived. The curse that had haunted his family for centuries hung over them both, a storm of darkness threatening to consume what little peace they had found. He moved with a predator's precision, silent and swift. The city streets, usually alive with whispers and lantern light, were empty and still, as if holding its breath. Kaelin felt the pull of Leora's presence through the threads that connected them, the faint pulse of courage, the spark of determination. She was unbroken, even in the face of danger, and that strength gave him both hope and fear. Inside the tower, Leora pressed her back against the cold stone walls. The room was small, barren, and filled with the faint hum of magical wards designed to suppress her emerging power. Yet she did not panic. Oh, she had trained. She had learned to sense magic, and she had discovered that fear was a tool she no longer needed. Instead, she focused on the bond that connected her to Kaelin, letting it guide her energy. The mark on her sleeve pulsed faintly, as if responding to his approach.
Kaelin, she whispered, though she knew he could not hear her through the wards.
Still, speaking his name steadied her, weaving her focus into determination. Outside, Kaelin paused, feeling her voice across the distance. A ripple of recognition passed through him. He could feel her courage as clearly as if she were standing beside him. He lowered his head, murmuring her name, and shadows shifted, bending into blades of protection as he advanced toward the tower. The first wave of guards appeared, but they were no match for him. Shadows twisted around them, holding them at bay without harm, a controlled fury that spoke of Kaelin's restraint and his growing mastery of power tempered by purpose. Every movement was precise, careful, but deadly in intent. Kaelin would not hurt Leora. He would only ensure her safety. When he reached the tower door, the final wards pulsed against him. The magic was strong, ancient, meant to deter even a vampire of Kaelin's power. Breaths. He pressed his hand against the door, closing his eyes, feeling the threads of connection to Leora and the pulse of her courage. Slowly, the wards began to dissolve, bending to the harmony of their combined will. Inside, Leora felt a shift. The oppressive hum of the magic faded, replaced by a resonant energy that vibrated through her bones. She raised her hands, instinctively reaching for the invisible force that connected her to Kaelin. The door creaked open, and there he was, tall, imposing, yet every inch a protector rather than a predator. "Are you unharmed?" he asked, his voice soft, carrying both relief and command. "Yes," she replied, steady. "I am unharmed. Thanks to you." Kaelin's eyes softened, but there was no time for sentiment. Outside, the rival vampires who had orchestrated her imprisonment were gathering, aware now that Kaelin had moved to reclaim her. Their faces were masks of fury, their intent clear. They would not allow Leora to live if it meant the curse could be broken.
Kaelin extended a hand to her.
"Stay close," he said. "The danger is far from over." Leora stepped beside him, feeling the familiar pull of courage and connection. Together they moved through the streets, shadows bending to their command. Kaelin's control was complete, but he relied on her presence as much as she relied on his. Each step was a dance of power and trust, of danger and determination. At the heart of the city, in the ruins of the oldest cathedral, the final confrontation awaited. The rival vampires had gathered, forming a circle around an ancient altar where the curse's magic had first been sealed. They were powerful, dark, and relentless, but Kaelin and Leora did not falter. "This ends tonight," Kalen said, his voice carrying across the stone, steady and commanding. "The curse ends, and you will no longer have power over this city or me." The leader of the rival vampires, a figure cloaked in black with eyes like polished obsidian, stepped forward. "You cannot undo what centuries have bound," he hissed. "You, a mortal, and you, an heir, think you can rewrite history." Kylan's gaze met Leora's, and in that silent moment they shared their resolve. They would face the darkness together. He extended a hand, and Leora placed hers upon his, the pulse of their combined courage and power radiating outward. The air shimmered, the ruins quaking with ancient magic awakening. The curse, dark and oppressive, rose like a wave, threatening to overwhelm them. Shadows twisted and reached, seeking to pull them into despair and fear. Diora's hands glowed faintly, guided by the strength Kalen lent her. She focused on the connection between them, the trust and courage that had grown through nights of training, through moments of tension, through whispered promises.
"Now," Kalen whispered. Together, they channeled their combined will.
Light met shadow in a dazzling display of energy, the force of centuries battling against the courage of two hearts bound by destiny. The rival vampires shrieked, retreating from the power that neither could command. The air shimmered, and a wave of energy pulsed outward, breaking the ancient magic that had cursed Kalen's family for generations. For a moment, silence fell. The ruins were still, the air heavy with the scent of ozone and moonlight. And then, slowly, the curse unraveled, dissolving like mist under the sun. Talon and Leora stood at the center of the altar, breathless, hearts racing yet victorious. Kalen turned to her, his eyes dark but soft, filled with a mixture of awe and gratitude. "You did it," he said, his voice low. "We did it." "We," she echoed. "Together." The rival vampires had vanished, retreating into the shadows, their plans foiled. Kalen looked around the city, feeling a sense of peace he had never known. The centuries of cruelty and expectation had finally been lifted, replaced with possibility. And in that moment he realized that the true power had never been his fangs or his heritage. It had been courage, trust, and the willingness to change. He reached for Leora, gently taking her hand.
He glances around and "You have changed everything," he said, his voice quiet, reverent.
"But me." Leora looked up at him, her heart swelling with emotions she had never allowed herself to feel fully before. "And you've shown me that even shadows can have light," she whispered. For the first time, Kalen allowed himself to smile freely, the coldness in his eyes softening into warmth. The bond between them, forged through fear, courage, and trust, had transformed both of them. He was no longer merely the vampire heir bound by darkness. He was someone capable of love, of restraint, of change. The city slowly stirred under the rising sun. Light spilled across the towers and alleys, revealing a world renewed. Kalen and Leora stood side by side, hands brushing, their shadows merging with the morning. Pace. Yet even in victory, a sense of vigilance remained. The darkness had been lifted, but the world was vast, and the echoes of old magic never fully disappeared. They walked back through the city together, silent but connected. Leora's laughter, soft and musical, filled the spaces where shadows once reigned. Kalen's presence was steady, protective, yet patient, a balance of power and respect he had never known before. As they reached the outskirts of the city, the ruins of the cathedral behind them, Kalen stopped. He turned to Leora, eyes searching hers. "This is only the beginning," he said softly.
I know,
She replied. "But it is a beginning we face together." The first rays of sun touched the city, casting silver and gold across rooftops and spires. The curse was broken, the danger past, yet the bond between them remained, stronger than any magic or shadow. Kalen and Leora had faced darkness, uncovered power within themselves, and discovered the rarest magic of all: trust, courage, and love that could not be extinguished. Bad. Hand in hand they stepped forward into the light, knowing that the world would challenge them again, that shadows would rise, and that danger was never truly gone. But they had faced the impossible and emerged transformed. The city of Arendor, once a place of fear and whispering shadows, held its breath as the first human and vampire to challenge destiny walked side by side through its streets, broken. Together they had rewritten history, broken the curse, and discovered the strength of hearts bound not by blood or power, but by trust and courage. And somewhere in the distance a shadow flickered, as if reminding them that darkness was always near. But now they faced it together,